Lesson 28 Project Help video. Refer to your answers in the Lesson 26 project. As the bridge is being raised one day, it gets stuck halfway, where its angle of elevation is theta over 2. Remember that tangent theta equals 3/4 when the bridge is fully raised. What is cosine theta over 2? So if you look at your half angle identity, if you haven't already noticed that I put a formula sheet into your course for you to download if you would like to, that has all of the formulas in one place for you, so you don't have to keep trying to look them up or look back and forth between the lessons in order to get it. So if you look at that, then cosine of theta over 2's formula is plus or minus the square root of 1 plus cosine theta divided by 2. And then from lesson 26 project video, from my project video, I made my cosine of theta is equal to 4 over 5. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to plug that in for where I have cosine theta. So I'm going to have 1 plus 4/5 divided by 2. Now I need to take into account that there's that plus or minus in front of our square root here. If we're dealing with a bridge and we're dealing with angles and distances, we can't have a negative distance, so we're only going to deal with the positive square root, so we're not going to have the negative square root. So I can either write a positive out in front, or I can just leave it and it's known to be positive. So when I look inside my square root here, the first thing I need to do is get a common denominator on the top. So my common denominator is going to be 5. So I'm going to change my 1 to be 5 divided by 5 plus my 4/5 divided by 2. 5 plus 4 gives me a 9. Keep my denominator the same as the 5, all over 2. Now I have a fraction divided by a number, so I'm going to keep my top fraction of 9/5, change from division to multiplication, flip over the 2. Now remember, 2 is the same as 2 over 1, so when we flip it over, it is 1/2. Now I'm going to multiply. 9 times 1 is a 9, 5 times 2 gives me a 10. Take the square root of the top, square root of the bottom, so square root of 9 gives me a 3. And then I have the square root of 10 on the bottom. Now I can't have a square root in the denominator, so I need to rationalize. So I need to multiply by the square root of 10 on the top and the square root of 10 on the bottom. So on the top, 3 times the square root of 10 is just 3 square root of 10. Square root of 10 times square root of 10 on the bottom is 10. Because remember, if you have two square roots that have the same number inside multiplied times each other, you just get the number inside. Or if you don't remember that, you can always do the whole entire multiplying it out. So you would do the insides multiplied times each other. 10 times 10, you would have the square root of 100. Since 10 times 10 is 100, the square root of 100 is 10. So cosine of theta over 2 is 3 root 10 divided by 10. The queen suggests adding 30 degrees to the angle of elevation. To find the cosine of the new angle, she adds cosine theta and cosine 30 degrees. Is her method correct? If not, what should she have done to find the cosine of the new angle? Well, if you look at your addition, and your sum and difference identities, and you look at the one for cosine for the sum, you don't just end up with a cosine theta and plus a cosine 30, which is what the queen suggests that they do. So her method is not correct. So no, her method is not correct. What she should have done is she should have used the identity of cosine alpha plus beta equals a cosine alpha times a cosine beta minus sine alpha times sine of beta. That should have been what she used instead of just trying to do cosine theta plus cosine of 30. Refer to the previous question. What is cosine theta plus cosine 30? Well, let's substitute in theta and 30 for alpha and beta into the formula that we had just written out. So we're going to have that it's cosine of theta times cosine of 30 degrees minus the sine of theta times the sine of 30 degrees. Now you need to, in order to solve this, you need to know from lesson 26 what cosine of theta is, what sine of theta is. You also need your unit circle so that you know what cosine 30 degrees is and sine 30 degrees is. So when I look back at lesson 26, my cosine of theta is 4/5. From the unit circle, cosine of 30 degrees is the square root of 3 divided by 2 minus sine of theta from lesson 26 is 3/5. Sine of 30 is 1/2. So now I'm going to go ahead and multiply my 4/5 times root 3 over 2, so I get 4 times root 3 on the top. 5 times 2 on the bottom gives me a 10, minus on the top 3 times 1 gives me a 3. On the bottom 5 times 2 is a 10. Since I have the same number in my denominator, I can go ahead and subtract the top, so I get 4 root 3 minus 3 divided by 10. And that would be what my answer is for the cosine of theta plus 30 degrees. Hope this helps out with lesson 28.